Today I wanted to try to go into the meeting that I had with the team of doctors. After the pathology report, I had an MRI done, and then I was then connected with the multidisciplinary clinic, is what they call it, MDC, where they pretty much connect you with your team of doctors to handle the process for you. And so that consisted of me meeting with a oncologist, a breast surgeon, and then a radiation oncologist. The visit itself, it was a lot. I mean, it's a lot. When I spoke with the nurse who kind of set up the appointment and everything, she was just kind of like, prepare for being to be there at least about 3 hours. And so that's about what that visit consisted of. So it was a lot. So it's a lot to unpack, but I'm going to try to do my best to unpack every single detail of it and not miss anything. Okay, so once pathology came back, these doctors received a referral pretty much from the Dr. Shaw, which was, the doctor that did the biopsy and all of that. And so with all of that, and then, whoever read pathology, they all came together to look at my particular case and find the best way to treat my subtype of breast cancer. And so by the time I came in, I was coming into what was already going to be considered the best plan of option at that time. And so I pick up on, March 21st, where I went in and met these doctors. And so I met with the oncologist first. His name is Dr. Stevenson. Dr. Stevenson, great guy. When I got put in a room to wait on him, I remember I guess it was a nurse or somebody came in to take some measurements of my arm, just to kind of prepare for if there's any issues with lymphedema or anything like that. That's kind of how they started it off with. I also met with the nurse navigator, and so they're just trying to make you feel comfortable as you wait on the doctor. Once he came in, trying to break the ice a little bit. So he had little small chit chat, where are you from? And I'm like, Simpsonville, and little things like that. And it came down to me, basically was why? He was asking just basic conversation questions, but I was just like, why? And he was like, I'm just trying to break the ice a little bit and make conversation. My best friend was with me that day. Cedric was with me. Baby Mateo was with me. I was able to bring 2 visitors, so that was a plus. She's a nurse practitioner. We went to nursing school together, and so I wanted to have someone else there with a medical background to be there as my support person as well, in addition to having that family support person. And so she was laughing because she was like, calm down. He's just trying to make conversation. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get this show on the road. Let's talk about what's going on. We are here for business. Let's get down to business. But once all of that was kind of, the ice was broken, then he got into speaking about my particular type of breast cancer. And so that's why I have this book here, just because that's kind of where all my notes are. And so for the meeting with him first, so like I said, Dr. Stevenson, he's the oncologist. He came in basically saying, historically, they used to treat breast cancer surgically. That's how they looked at it. Let's get as much of that tissue out, even down to the muscle if need be, lymph nodes, whatever they have to do to cut it out. Let's cut it out, and that's how we treat it. However, they know based on research and statistics that wasn't necessarily the best way to treat all breast cancers. And so how he explained it is basically, with the last 6 to 7 years, they have a better understanding of how to treat breast cancer and just different types of breast cancer. So breast cancer, you got your whole, the whole conglomerate of, different types of cancers out there, from liver to lungs to, breast, ovarian, and such. but then breast cancer itself has its own subtypes. And so understanding the subtypes makes a big difference in understanding how to treat particular breast cancers. And so he drew on the board like, an image of what a cell would look like and the receptors or the keys to unlock those cells. And so how they come up with the term triple negative is basically they're testing those cells to see what they respond to. And so they're checking to see, does it respond to estrogen? So your hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, those are different keys for it. And then another one that they look at is the HER2. Is it HER2 positive or HER2 negative, which is another key. And so when they try, those keys to those locks and those locks that, they don't open, that lets them know that my cell does not respond to those. And so mine is negative for estrogen, negative for progesterone, and negative for HER2. And so that's where the triple negative term comes from. With that being said, it plays a different role in terms of my treatment path. Some particular subtypes will get surgery first and then chemotherapy. With triple negative, it is my understanding from Dr. Stevenson that a neoadjuvant treatment plan, I think I said that right, is the better option. And basically they want to try to get the chemo in before to get it get it in there as early as possible and get a response as early as possible, because then they can look and see if the cancer cells are responding to the chemotherapy. And just out of all the different subtypes of cancer, according to research, triple negative does respond pretty well to chemotherapy. Now, with that being said, it still limits, I guess, the other types of options that are out there. So some women who cancers are hormone based, then they can take pills to kind of help keep those cancer cells at bay, or keep the hormone levels where they need to be to, keep the cancer from multiplying and things like that. When yours does not respond to hormone, that's not an option. So in terms of being able to take a pill, that got crossed off my list. My treatment options were local treatment and systemic treatment. Local treatment would include the surgery and the radiation. The systemic treatment would include chemotherapy or a pill, but in my case, the pill is not an option, so the only systemic treatment is the chemotherapy. We also talked about staging. And so in terms of staging, they looked at mine as MC, big T, number 2, N0, M0. And what that stands for is the M is a multifocal clinical diagnosis, and multifocal meaning that the cancer areas in my breast, they were in multiple areas. It wasn't just one area. It wasn't just the one area that I found. If you've been following so far, you know that I felt what I felt, but then the mammogram and the biopsy revealed additional areas that had cancer. And so mine is considered multifocal. So that's what the M is. Clinical diagnosis, meaning this is before surgery. So it's before another pathological report, which we'll get when I get surgery. So clinical staging, tumor size 2, no node involvement, and no activity or no evidence of metastatic spread or anything like that. So that's what the M0 was. All of that then leads to official stage of 2B. Meaning because of the size of the area that they were looking at and the fact that it doesn't have those positive receptors. And so it's considered triple negative. If you know any research on triple negative is a more aggressive type cancer because of how it grows, because of the amount of deaths that are associated with it. And so, he kind of came up, he kind of came out up front with, like, you know, I'm just going to be honest, like, it is an aggressive cancer, but it is a curable cancer. And so even though it's aggressive, hearing the idea or hearing the fact that it's curable is also reassuring. So then it led into him going through like the next step. So like we said, he's recommended the chemo before surgery to get in front of it as soon as possible. That next step would be to get a port placed, have an echo done, because with chemotherapy, those are different cocktails of drugs. And so one of the drugs in particular has been known to cause heart failure when it's given in high doses. Dr. Stevenson made it a point to say I would be getting half of that dose amount that reaches the heart failure threshold. I think it was about 450 milligrams, if I'm not mistaken, is what he called out, and I would be getting about 225 milligrams. So not close to the threshold where it would lead to heart failure based off of past experiences and research and evidence. However, it's still something that they want to monitor, so you got to get an echo done before you start the treatment. The other thing that he wanted to do was genetics, because I am 37 years old and I do have a family history of different cancers, and particularly the triple negative cancer, which tends to affect women under 40 a lot more than any other type of cancer. He wanted to do the genetics as well. And so the goal, I left out of there, I think he was in there with us maybe about 30 to 45 minutes, explaining everything, and left out of there with the goal would be before I go to surgery to have no evidence of disease present in the breast tissue at all. That would be the goal. That would be a complete pathologic response is how they refer to it. And so he said that they would be checking along the way to make sure that the cells are responding, and just knowing that we are headed in the right direction for that. And so just to tell you a little bit about him, he had been doing this for 20-something years. From my understanding, about 85% of his business is breast cancers. He went in to say how, my treatment plan is doable. We would need flexibility. So he asked what was my career, and, I shared that we own our own real estate company and I sell real estate. And so he said that, it seems like that would help in terms of the type of schedule that I'll be on for chemotherapy. Because he said chemo is work. It's work. Coming down there is work. I mean, he really, really emphasized the fact that, even though it's doable and I'll do fine on it, it's still work that has to be put in place. And so I understood that. He also wanted to do a fertility consult, because when asked the question if I was done having kids, I think I didn't respond fast enough with saying no. When he asked me, I said, well, I feel like I am. I, always thought that I would be after I got my baby girl. However, I don't know, like when you ask that question, it's such a final decision. And I said, basically, going through something like this kind of makes you feel like you have to be, like you have no choice, because ultimately the chemo is probably going to destroy your eggs and things like that. And he was like, well, no, that doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't have to. We can do a fertility consult. We can preserve your eggs. There's an injection that you can receive to kind of delay the ovarian cycle, which also kind of delays any damage to your ovaries and eggs and things like that. So he was like, basically there are options. You don't have to just go with the idea that because I'm getting chemo, the whole idea of fertility and having more kids later down the line is out the window. And so he said he would put in a fertility consult, which I was like, okay, whatever. I still felt like, I still feel like I'm done, but it's probably necessary. So we'll go with it. He also talked about receiving support from the AYA, which is the adolescent young adult group. Because I am under 40, I fall under the adolescent young adult group of survivors or those dealing with cancer. And so he said that would be good just to have support from other people, like, around my age group. There was a study he wanted me to look at about fatigue. The NIRS study talks about fatigue. When you're going through chemo, fatigue seems to be like the #1 side effect outside of other things. And so there's a study in place that goes into like exercise and like doing activities and stuff before treatment to try to help combat the side effects of the fatigue from the chemo. He talked about the side effects a little bit, hair loss, being one of those things. They do have a process called cold capping to help preserve your hair follicles, so maybe you don't lose all your hair in the process. And so he was gonna put in a consult for that. Talked about me having a slight risk of infection. He said it wouldn't be a huge risk because of, my age and overall health, even though, you have this breast cancer diagnosis, you're still overall healthy. And so ideally, he said it would be a small risk of infection for me. And then nausea was the other thing that most people complain about. And so with the nausea, he said they give you so many meds now that more than likely that's going to be like probably not one of the main things I complain about. Fatigue would probably be the main one. And so being that there are lots of meds to help with that pretty much covered like the main things that people tend to complain about when they're on the treatment plans. But to keep in mind that the treatment plan is extremely doable. Understanding that I have 4 children, I'm married, I'm under 40, so I have a busy life, we run a business, and everything else that goes with that. He was still kind of putting emphasis on the fact that it's doable. What else can I say? Again, said that it was highly curable. It's a bad type of breast cancer, but highly curable. But what I did like about him, I think the most, is the fact that he left out of there saying that as long as God has the final say or final authority, God has the final authority in all of this. So he's saying that it's a bad cancer, but it's completely curable. But ultimately, God has the final authority in all of this, which we understand it and we know that to be true. And so my reaction was, I agree. And I've already had that conversation with God. So as long as you're on the same page with how this needs to go, then we are all aligned how we need to be. And so that is for me to beat this and cure this and get past it. And so I like the fact that he, is a God-fearing man. How deep in his faith, I have no concerns about that. I just appreciate the fact that he knows God and he knows that he specifically said he didn't want the responsibility either way, and gives all of that credit to God. And so that was very, very, very reassuring, because I think I went in there with the idea that, I wanted my team to be as positive as possible. I wanted my team to know that, regardless of what this is and what we're dealing with, we still are looking for the best outcome in this situation, in my situation. And so to have him come in and pretty much affirm everything that I was already looking for my team to have, and then to end it with him being a man of God, it was like, for me, I felt like it was confirmation that he at least was one of the people that I would have wanted on my team. And so I appreciated that a lot. What else did he say? Basically, like I said, just his goal is to do the best that they can with their worldly needs. Like, again, all credit goes to God. I did learn that his mom also had breast cancer. I did not want to ask or touch on it at that time in terms of how long she, dealt with it or anything like that, but I do know that she was diagnosed with breast cancer at 26. And so with that being said, you wonder why some people end up in some of the positions or some of the careers that they go with. And that was confirmation for me to know that he probably became an oncologist because of his mom's, breast cancer diagnosis. Hey, baby Matea, come on in. Come on in. Come on. All right, say hi to the camera. All right, so that would cover Dr. Stevenson. The next doctor we saw that day was Dr. Allgood. And so he's the breast surgeon. He was an older gentleman, very nice, very pleasant guy to meet with. He came in to talk about the surgical standpoint of it. So this will go back to the multifocal part again. So with my particular diagnosis being multifocal, meaning more than one area of the breast, and the MRI showing even other questionable, suspicious areas. His recommendation was that surgery would be more so a mastectomy instead of a lumpectomy or any type of what they consider breast conservation surgery. He just didn't think that it would be the best idea to try to conserve the breast tissue with it being in so many different areas. Now, at the time, it was a little overwhelming to hear like we were going to go straight into mastectomy, but at the same time, I kind of prepared for it. And so even though it was hard hearing it, I still felt like that probably was the best route to take, given the nature that, again, you know, age and history, given the nature of age and history, it's like you don't want to have to deal with something coming back up in a couple years in a breast that you already had to deal with something in before. And so ultimately, if mastectomy diminishes that risk as much as possible, then I want that risk diminished. You know what I'm saying? So I even asked him about the option of having the right breast removed too and doing a double mastectomy. And so he definitely said that is an option as well. And so we could just, discuss that as we get later down the path of, where that would go. And so he kind of, went back through talking about triple negative a little bit more. Not as much as Dr. Stevenson, because Dr. Stevenson did a really good job with covering that, but he did touch on that a little bit. And then he touched on like doing a sentinel node biopsy at the time of surgery, which means that they'll basically inject something in the breast and to see what nodes it travels to first. And then they kind of know what nodes to take out for pathology at the time of surgery to test to see if there's any cancer cells present in those nodes. And so that's what a sentinel node biopsy. Based on the results of the sentinel node, then there may be additional lymph nodes that may have to come out. And so lymph node dissection is one of the terminologies he brought up. From there, he touched on a little bit about the possibility of, well, not necessarily a possibility. He touched on the need for radiation at that time as well. And so he was saying how chemo first, surgery, and then radiation, and then having reconstruction surgery after radiation. Overall, I did feel like he was a pretty good person to have on the team as well. My sis joked about him seeming a little nervous in the room during the consultation. However, she did also point out the fact that his hands were very steady as he drew different diagrams and explained several things to us. And so all in all, I think you pretty much kind of prefer that your surgeon has steady hands, and hopefully everything else will be able to work itself out. But definitely like the fact that the hands were steady. After Dr. Allgood, we met with Dr. O'Connell. Dr. O'Connell would be the radiation oncologist. He served time in the military. He had a big family. I want to say he had like 6 or 7 children, so family man, like that about him. He came in with a different insight, because up until we met him, we felt like radiation was definitely on the table, because Dr. Stevenson mentioned surgery radiation. Dr. Allgood mentioned surgery radiation. And so then Dr. O'Connell came in and he kind of was like, well, your nodes were negative at first. And Dr. Stevenson mentioned this as well, like when they did the MRI, the node that was enlarged or appeared to be enlarged during the ultrasound on the MRI seemed even more insignificant. And so they felt like pretty good about that node. And so with it being negative on pathology, because I was wondering like, okay, well, we know we got a sample of the node, but how do we know we got the position of the node to get the best sample? Because that particular side just may not have had any cancer cells on it, whereas another side of the node could have. And so, I talked to Dr. Stevenson about that, and he was like, that's a good point. But looking at it on the MRI also shows that it wasn't as, I guess, enlarged as it appeared on the ultrasound. And so for them, that made them feel pretty good about the node also having the negative pathology up front. And so with that being said, Dr. O'Connell was more so like they would make that decision at the time of surgery and not necessarily right now. And that's based off of, he touched on how with surgery, they're gonna, the goal is to get clean margins. And so with the clean margins and doing the sentinel node biopsy, depending on how that goes, will determine whether or not I need radiation. So hypothetically, clean margins, sentinel node biopsy comes back negative. There's no lymph node dissection because everything is negative. There's no evidence of any node involvement of having any positive cancer cells. Then in his description, that is not a parameter to do radiation at that point if you're doing a mastectomy. If you're doing a lumpectomy, then that would be different. But he said with a mastectomy, clear margins, negative nodes, that would equal no radiation in his book. But on the flip side, you do mastectomy, for whatever reasons, margins aren't that clear, nodes come back positive, then that is a parameter for radiation. And so that was, at the time, I guess a little gleam of hope, because it's like, well, maybe you don't have to go through every particular step in the cancer treatment process. But honestly, I'm at a point where I'm willing to do whatever is necessary. So if it is necessary, then, to God be the glory, because I don't want to miss a step because I'm being, selfish or worn out in the process. And so at the end of the day, whether radiation is needed or not needed, I'm totally at peace about it. It's just a matter of, we just got to wait it out and see. And so that was the bulk of the appointment. Like I said, it was a long day. There was a lot of discussions, a lot of things being discussed. And we left out of there knowing that next up would be me getting a port placed, having an echocardiogram done, and just, going down the path to get cured, get treated, and get this thing out of my body. I like the fact that Dr. O'Connell was also another God-fearing man. So at this point, I felt like, again, my team was definitely the right team. And I felt like God designed my team and put this in place because he knew what I needed at the time. When I left out of there, I had to share the information with several of my sisters and those that are standing in my corner. And some of the feedback has been like, get second opinions and things like that, which I'm not opposed to. I'm always the person that's always a strong proponent of second opinions. But I feel like at this point in my process that I also wanted to get in front of it as quickly as possible. And so for me, second opinions would mean I have to wait on an appointment. I have to travel to Atlanta, because that's where a lot of those other resources were coming from. And so I got to get an appointment. I got to travel to Atlanta. I don't know how long that's going to be. The anxiety of me thinking about all of that was starting to become overwhelming. And so it got to the point where I said, I think I want to just start with what I have right now, because starting with what I have right now just means treatment. And at this point, I have looked at so many different other physicians and specialists that are out there that treat triple-negative breast cancer. They all have the same treatment plan in place, meaning chemo first and then surgery. And so for me, second, third, fourth opinion, if this is what the golden standard is, what is the other doctor going to tell me different for this part of the process? Now, surgery, radiation, that's a whole nother, that's another step. But just for oncology part, I felt like I was in a position, and I do hope and pray that I make the right decision in this and allow God to guide Dr. Stevenson, so that I receive the best care that I need to receive to cure this cancer and rid it from my body. So that's kind of how I felt about that. Again, it's a lot to take in. it's just one of those things where you just gotta go through it and research and educate yourself as much as possible to get everything you need. Again, all the doctors so far, amazing doctors. They seem well knowledgeable in their areas of expertise. And I feel like, they were placed there to do what we need to do with this. The rest of the staff, very nice. We got a tour of the infusion room. We got to meet those in the lab. We got to meet those in, all the different areas of the cancer treatment center off of Ferris Road. And so that was, it was good walking through there, getting a tour of what my life would be like for the next however many weeks as we go through this. We also met with the nurse navigator again, which pretty much had set everything up and gave me like this huge resource book to look at, which I'll share all the resources on another video very soon. But yeah, she gave me a huge resource book to go through and just kind of, gave me the instructions of what would be happening next in terms of getting the port placed and what time I need to be there for that. And gave Matea some snacks. Everyone was like, let's get this going. And we kind of left out knowing what the plan was. Oh, I even met the nurses in the infusion center, which all Tim, Cindy, amazing people. Everybody in there, amazing. Tammy, everybody, amazing. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you don't look to be on that path. Not at this point in my life. I will say that so many times. I'll never get tired of saying, because I just can't express how much that you just do not want to be going through something like this at this stage of your life. But if you're going to go through it, then of course you want to go through it with the best team in place, from your support system to your doctors, your nurses, and everyone that has come and cared with you. You want it to be the best people out there. And so again, just left out of there knowing what the next steps were, and went home with, all right, this is what we have, and this is what we need to do to get rid of it. So I know this video is long, another long video. Sorry, I'll try to get it all in one, just to get all of that out of my head right now. And so thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for continuing to support what it is that I'm sharing. And, just, continue to follow, like, comment, subscribe, whatever. That's what I'm here for. I'm not going through this just for me. I'm pretty sure, whatever this is can help somebody else somewhere. And so again, thank you guys. And I will be back soon. All right.
What you say, Matea?